So which of Logitech's streaming lights should you buy? The Litra Beam or the Litra Beam LX? Or should you skip both of these entirely? Let's break it down. The Cliff Notes version of the differences between these two lights is this. Both lights have the same max brightness and color temperature range, but only the Litra Beam LX can consistently get to its max brightness. Talk about why in a little bit. The Litra Beam is powered by USB, but the LX has an AC adapter. Both devices have Bluetooth, but I was never able to get the Litra Beams to actually work properly. The Litra Beam LX has a secondary customizable RGB light in addition to the white light. The Litra Beam only has the white light. The Litra Beam launched for $100 US and the Litra Beam LX for $150 US, and that's what I bought both of them for. Now, specifications. Starting off with the type of light. So these are both LED lights. As far as color temperature, both of these are on the white side, 2700 to 6500 Kelvin. And the RGB side on the Litra Beam LX, this has 16 million colors for the RGB side. Now the brightness on both of these lights gets up to 400 lumens, which really isn't that bright in comparison to some other lights, but I'm using them right now. I'm using the Litra Beam LX on one side and the Litra Beam on the other. Pretty good even light, and this is my Sony ZV-1 camera. I tested this in another YouTube video and the footage is actually pretty good, but I'll really go deep into performance a little bit later in this review. But speaking about that 400 lumens, only the Litra Beam LX can reliably actually get up to that maximum brightness. The Litra Beam probably isn't. Mine gets capped at 75% power or 50% depending on which USB slot I put it in. I've seen other videos where people had it stuck at like 25%. Somebody actually had it maxed out. And the reason this varies so much is because of the power supply. The Litra Beam connects using USB. It comes with a 78-inch 2-meter Type-C to Type-A cable. The Litra Beam LX uses a proper AC adapter, which is what the Litra Beam really should have come with, and I'm going to keep harping on that in this review. And the USB cable, the 78-inch 2-meter cable, USB-C to A, that's only used to connect to Logitech G Hub or to do firmware updates. So this ensures that the Litra Beam LX can always get its maximum power. Now, connectivity deserves its own section, and I'm going to save you a lot of time, a lot of headache, and a lot of money in this section. Basically, I had to deal with the Litra Beam's many issues so that hopefully you don't have to. So both these devices can be connected to a computer using USB, and they can be controlled in the Logitech G Hub app, which I have open right now. And both devices have Bluetooth functionality. So the Litra Beam LX, this Bluetooth signal here, and the Litra Beam have got that connected USB. But currently there is no mobile app for these devices. Even without G Hub, you can control these devices with the controls on the light itself, but you don't get the same level of granularity, and also the RGB options are a lot more limited without the software. Now here's where the dominoes really start to fall for the Litra Beam, and why, aside from the RGB, which is probably unnecessary for most people, the Litra Beam LX is really what the Litra Beam should have been at launch. So domino number one, the Litra Beam's USB connection is easily its biggest weakness. The included USB cable is way too short. I kind of showed the lights a little bit, but it's really hard to get them connected to the back of my tower when you have the light expanded up really tall. But more importantly, it just doesn't draw enough power from the USB ports on my computer. The highest I was able to get is about 75%. And this is the same computer that I've used to have 4 4K webcams running all at the same time and recording in OBS. One of them 4K 60 frames per second, the other 4K 30. I've tried USB 3.1, 3.2, just like they say. Neither of these were able to get the Litra Beam to its full power. Now, plugging it into an AC adapter did work, but I wasn't able to see if I was actually getting that full maximum brightness because there's no way to check without G Hub. And this leads into domino number 2. The Bluetooth on the Litra Beam simply would not connect to my PC. Now, I'm not quite sure if it's an issue with the light specifically or something with my computer, but here's the thing. The Litra Beam LX, as you saw, it's connected Bluetooth to my computer. The Litra Beam simply will not show up. However, the Litra Beam does show up on my phone. It shows up on my brother's laptop. The Litra Beam, no matter what I do, it just does not show up in the Bluetooth devices. Every other device, got my Xbox controller, I got a bunch of different Bluetooth devices that will show up on my computer. I even got a new Bluetooth adapter just in case to see if that was the issue. But the Litra Beam just never shows up, so I have to use it USB, which of course isn't going to get it its full power. And now for domino number 3 and number 4, since there is no phone app and since there is no Wi-Fi functionality like the Elgato lights, the Bluetooth working on my phone, the fact that this device shows up and can be connected to my phone is completely useless. This is in contrast to the Litra Beam LX, which It has its own AC power supply, perfect, and the Bluetooth worked perfectly, immediately, and consistently. So TLDR, if you want to avoid power draw issues, if you want to avoid the issue with Bluetooth maybe or maybe not being detected by your computer, then I would just skip the Litra Beam entirely and only consider the Litra Beam LX. But anyway, on to performance. Like I said, the Litra Beam is going to be capped to 75% for these demonstrations, but the Litra Beam LX will be at 100%, which actually honestly gives a decent contrast to my face, doesn't make it completely flat. So the two devices I'll be using for these performance demonstrations are this, the Sony ZV-1, but also this, the Logitech StreamCam, because this is a pretty mid-range webcam and it's from Logitech themselves. I've locked in the settings as far as the white balance and everything on both of these devices, and I have the settings on screen so that you can also see and get a comparison. So starting off with the Logitech StreamCam, Litra Beam LX to the right, Litra Beam to the left. Maybe a 15-degree angle for the Litra Beam, 45 for the LX. Now having these at a vertical position is ideal in my testing. If you have it horizontal, I'll show kind of the issue with that. But let's just be honest, even with two of these lights on the Logitech StreamCam, this just doesn't look that impressive. I've cranked up the game significantly on this device so that I can actually get it to be kind of usable, but there's a lot of grain in the background. I know this isn't that great of a webcam, but there's just not enough light for it. Now switching over to the Sony ZV-1, this does a lot better with this level of light. So if you have a camera like this, a point and shoot, or if you have like an actual mirrorless or DSLR camera, this actually might be enough light for you. Now the thing is, it doesn't get the background that bright, and there is still some grain because right now the ISO, I've got this locked to 500 so that it can be bright enough. But I know some people do like the background to be kind of dim, so if that's the look that you're going for, then these might actually work out quite well for you. Now back to the StreamCam, I'm going to compare one versus the other. This is still vertical right now. This is the Litra Beam by itself. So solo, there is definitely not enough light here. But in test number 3, I'll show this horizontal so that if you only do have one light, you actually can get something to work with it. But this is still relatively even, and it's not flattering because there's not enough light, but it is pretty even. Not a lot of hot spots, and doesn't make like the creases and stuff like that really stand out. And this is what one light looks like on the Sony ZV-1. Not as even obviously with both, but this light's actually not terrible just by itself while it is just vertical. And again, this is 75% brightness on the Litra Beam. Now this is just one light vertical Logitech StreamCam, the Litra Beam LX. A little bit brighter than the Litra Beam, of course, is 100%. And now this is the Sony ZV-1. So if you're going to be using these lights vertical, if you have a webcam, you're definitely going to need to, and you really should have to, even if you do have a decent camera anyway. But let's go ahead and show these horizontal so I can kind of demonstrate why I don't think that these are that great for horizontal use. So now I've got the Litra Beam itself horizontal directly in front of me. And while this does brighten up my face a little bit more than if it is vertical, the issue is it's a lot more of a concentrated light. So you'll see the fine lines now, they really start to show on my face. And that's not the type of flattering soft light that I want. It's not quite as apparent on this, the Sony ZV-1, same test, but you can still definitely see it. And it's just got, it's putting those shadows down on you and making those fine lines and wrinkles stand out more than they should. It's just because the light, it's really thin. It's like a beam. I know it's called beam, but when you have it vertical, it gives even light from top to bottom. But when you have a horizontal just strip of light going down, then you just get those extra shadows on your face that just, they're not flattering for facial features really. Same story with the Litra Beam LX, though it is brighter, obviously because of the AC adapter that it has, able to get that full brightness, but still not really accomplishing what I want. And just because of the angle, it's kind of giving an interesting kind of cinematic look, but with the StreamCam, it doesn't really look that great. A little bit better on the Sony ZV-1, but definitely got really strong hot spots. You got like a lot of bright areas, but then also lots of like really harsh shadows, and just not the look for me. Now I'll do this final test more in depth in a different video. I'm going to be comparing these Litra Beam and Litra Beam LX to other lights on the market, but this is what they both look like together. This is on the Logitech StreamCam, and this is the Sony ZV-1. This is the Elgato key light to my right, and the Elgato key light Air to the left. And right now, this is the Sony ZV-1. These are at 6,000 Kelvin and 23% brightness. And the reason is because the Kelvin temperature doesn't really match up with what the Logitech lights have. But this is the Logitech StreamCam right now. And the light, it lightens a lot more of the background. The background's a lot brighter, and it's not as noticeable with the StreamCam just because the StreamCam, it has such a small sensor. But it's a lot softer and a lot better of a light on the Sony ZV-1. Now, the thing is, since these lights are so big and since they get so bright, I can actually make both of these cameras look a lot better if I improve the settings and brighten up these lights. So let me demonstrate that right now. First, with the Logitech StreamCam, I'm gonna go ahead and crank these up actually all the way to maximum so that you can just see comparison. Like, I was matching the brightness of the Logitech lights at about 23%. This is at 100%. So just so much brighter than those lights. Again, 400 lumens for the Litra Beam and Litra Beam LX, and 2800 on the Elgato Keylight and 1400 on the Keylight Air. So let's move these up. I'll actually put them to 100%, even though this is pretty extreme. It looks like it, but now on the StreamCam, I can decrease the gain now. 83 seems pretty decent. And this way there's a lot less grain in the image and the background's a lot brighter. If you're looking for that super dark look in the background, then this might not be ideal for you with the big panel lights. The light looks really good. Now over to the Sony ZV-1, what I can do on this device is I can decrease the ISO. So right now it's at 500. 200 looks pretty good. I can even bring it down to 160, but I really like the way that this looks. It's flattering, soft light, even got the background lit a little bit so there's not too much grain floating around back there. And with these settings, now I'm gonna actually turn the Elgato lights off. And this is the Litra Beam, 75% as high as I can get it, and the Litra Beam LX, 100%. Sony ZV-1, and then switch over to the Logitech StreamCam, and now there's just straight up not enough light at these settings. So if you are looking for the best performing lights, then Elgato's lights are better. They're brighter, and since they're larger panels, the light is a lot more spread out and it brightens up the background as well. The Litra Beam is still decent if you can actually get it to its maximum brightness. Same goes with the Litra Beam LX, but you definitely need two of them. And as you can see on this, the Logitech StreamCam, even with two of these lights at maximum brightness, it's probably not going to be enough. If you have something a lot better like Sony ZV-1, then yeah, if you got something like a legitimate mirrorless camera. But even in those cases, if we're just talking about the price point comparisons, I think it's better performance wise to go with the Elgato lights, either the Keylight Air or the Keylight. As far as RGB goes, I'll talk about that with the Litra Beam LX in the software section. All right, now build quality. This is actually a really positive section. While these lights are made completely of plastic, they're not that heavy and they're pretty easy to move around. The base at the bottom feels pretty solid as well, and they both have very good cable management with the clips and grooves on the stand. The buttons are also nice and clicky, very responsive. Now, when you're using the controls, not the app, the Litra Beam only has 5 levels of white balance and brightness, but there are 10 levels on the white side of the light for the Litra Beam LX. And on the RGB side, there are 9 different RGB options built into the device that you can cycle through. Now, the build specs are on the screen right now, but the adjustable height is super useful and you can tilt the light down quite a bit to get the perfect angle. And this was especially useful when using the RGB on the Litra Beam LX. I was able to get some pretty cool shots with product photography and just video for B-roll, even for this video itself. But the RGB, it definitely has some issues, and I'll talk about that in the software section. Mainly just comes down to the 400 lumens issue. Now, the mount of this, it has a round base. It's similar to the Keylight Air. It's not quite as sturdy as that thing because that thing is made out of metal, and it does take up a bit of space on your desk, especially if you already have multiple monitors like I do. It can be pretty rough. And while these aren't the heftiest devices, they're decently built and they're easy to move around. So of course the Litra Beam LX is more versatile because of its AC power supply, so you can kind of bring it wherever you want to. But if you're mostly going to be using it at a desk, then the Litra Beam is fine as well. Almost done. Software. In short, is Logitech G Hub. You can't really expect that great of an experience from the software. Now, I will go ahead and say that maybe I did get a dud unit with my Litra Beam because, as you can see right here, I just have never been able to get it connect with Bluetooth, even though I was able to get the Litra Beam LX. But even if you were able to get both these connected Bluetooth or wired, however you're going to do it, even with both of these connected, there's no way to actually sync them, which is really interesting considering that this whole thing, let's go to the Litra Beam LX, this option is called Lightsync. So I'll talk about that in just a moment, but the fact that you can't sync the two actual streamlights together is definitely a big oversight, because it's something that you can do in the Elgato app, and you can drag the slider to move the Kelvin temperature and move the brightness, and it will move all the lights. And you can even have like 4 different lights connected all together in the app, and then you can change them on your phone as well. But with this light, if I want to change one of the settings, I'd have to click into the Litra Beam LX, for example, and then these are the settings I've got right now. Here's the brightness difference, and let's say I wanted to turn it off. Just really simple. If I want to turn both of them off, I'd have to turn this off, then go back and then do the same thing to the other one. And same with changing the color temperature. If I change it to like a very specific amount, like right now I have this at 5200. If I were to change this to like 3900 Kelvin, I can't just have the other one, the Litra Beam LX, at that 3900 Kelvin. I have to go back, and then here we go, 3900 Kelvin. And then let's say I want to just revert it really quickly. It'd be quite the hassle to actually do that. So it's definitely, I don't know why there was such a big oversight here, but I'll just go ahead and move these back to their original positions that I had them at, 5200 and 5200 on this as well. Now let me get into the RGB on the Litra Beam LX. This is called Lightsync. It's actually a really interesting and pretty cool feature. The first thing that I will say is it doesn't seem like there's any actual onboard memory for this, because if G-Hub is closed, or if you unplug the device and like plug it somewhere else, whatever cool settings that you have here, like the freestyle animations, I actually have a kind of cool just effect that I had. Let's see, I think, yeah, this is the specific effect that I had that I really liked. But this and the different, specific animations that you can pick, like I like this contrastic, you can't use that if you don't have G-Hub open and it's not connected to G-Hub. If you just unplug it and bring it somewhere else, it's not going to save to the device itself. So I don't think that there's any actual flash memory there. But something that I really did like is that you can sync the light to the Logitech Yeti GX. So the way that you would actually do that is if you go into the Litra Beam LX, let's say you can't sync all of them. You can only sync like a few of the presets, and it'll have the sync lighting options down here. And color cycle is the one that I have. You can actually have it match the speed. If you would do that, and then you go to sync lighting options, then you can sync it to Yeti GX, and then the microphone down here would be the same. So if I was in the Litra Beam LX right now, let's say I wanted to have this do, I can't do color wave. That sucks, because this is a really cool effect. And these other ones I also can't sync. Screen sampler, audio visualizer. But let's just say that I had this breathing, and then I had it at like some sort of a red. Now I could actually have that, even though it's going to the Litra Beam LX, I can also have it go to this microphone. If I go ahead and sync lighting options right here, now the Yeti GX will be breathing also as well. They're not quite in sync. It's kind of weird. Like the timing is a little bit off, but the fact that it's able to do that with both of them is actually really cool. But it is a bit disappointing, because I was really looking forward to getting some cool B-roll and product photography shots, and even some stuff for thumbnails by making the background different colors. But this just really isn't bright enough to do anything with that, because if you have another light on to make it so that the ISO doesn't have to be cranked up to a crazy level so there's not so much grain, then the white light from another light is going to overpower this one. So you can't really get that cool RGB effect. These lights just not being that bright, it really ends up being an issue for that. So now for my verdict. It's true, this has been one of my most negative reviews in a very long time, but the reason is because Logitech is huge, just giant company, and Elgato already put out the blueprint for how to make good streaming lights several years ago. So what they could have easily done is just kind of copied some of the things that they did and then improve on some of the shortcomings, because there are some significant shortcomings with the Elgato lights. They could have kind of tweaked that, fixed that, but they kind of just fell short in the areas that Elgato did a good job at. And then as far as connectivity and the software, a lot of issues there. But if we're just comparing these two lights, specifically the Litra Beam to the Litra Beam LX, the Litra Beam LX is far superior because it has that AC adapter, and the Bluetooth actually worked for me. So this ensures that you're going to get the maximum brightness out of it. And the RGB is a nice bonus, probably not particularly useful, even just for like your desk aesthetics. You're probably not even going to really be able to see it that much. And if you do get the Litra Beam LX, I would definitely get 2 of them, because just with one, as I demonstrated, it's really not going to be bright enough, not going to be even enough light. But that's what leads me to my conclusion, which is, unfortunately, I don't actually recommend either of these 2 lights, simply because at 400 lumens, they just don't get bright enough to really do the job, unless you have like a really good camera. And even in that case, I think you can just get the Elgato lights like I'm showing right here. Logitech Stream Cam, they're just not really bright enough for it. And this is with both of these lights on. But I will have a more in-depth comparison of the Elgato lights to the Logitech Litra Beam and Litra Beam LX. So if you're interested in that, then consider subscribing to the channel.